My name is Lucas Harrison, and on July 18, 2017, I died. I never imagined I would be sharing this story, but I have no choice. What I saw, what Jesus showed me, was so terrifying, so undeniable, that keeping it to myself would be the greatest mistake of my life. Before that day, I had no strong opinions about faith. I wasn't an atheist, but I wasn't exactly a believer either. I thought religion was just something people used for comfort, a way to explain the unknown. My mother was religious. She prayed for me constantly, always saying, "Lucas, one day you'll understand." I would smile, nod, and go on with my life, never taking it seriously. That summer, life was good. I had just gotten a promotion at my job as a construction foreman, and I was making more money than ever before. My friends and I spent our nights out, drinking, laughing, living in the moment. I had plans. I wanted to buy a house, maybe start a business. But faith? Eternity? None of that mattered to me. I was focused on the now. That afternoon, I was driving home after work, exhausted but content. The heat was unbearable, and I remember rolling down my window, letting the hot air hit my face as I turned up the radio. I wasn't paying much attention to the road, just enough to get home. I didn't see the truck until it was too late. One moment, everything was normal. The next, there was a blinding set of headlights, the deafening sound of metal twisting, my body being thrown forward as everything around me shattered. Then, darkness. I didn't wake up in the hospital. I didn't feel pain. I didn't even realize at first that I had died. At first, there was nothing. Just a deep, endless void stretching in every direction. I wasn't scared, not yet. I was just confused. I tried to move, but I had no body, no weight, no sense of direction. Then, the silence was broken by whispers. At first, they were distant, barely audible. But as seconds passed, if time even existed there, they grew louder. Multiple voices, overlapping, murmuring in a language I didn't understand. The more I listened, the more I realized that these voices weren't human. They were something else, something watching, something waiting. Then, out of the darkness, a voice thundered, so powerful that it shook everything around me. "Stop!" Instantly, the whispers ceased. The darkness around me recoiled, and suddenly, a piercing light erupted through the void. It wasn't just light, it was alive. It moved, it breathed, and it carried a power I cannot describe. Out of that light stepped a figure, and the moment I saw him, I knew. Jesus. I had never given much thought to what he might look like, but in that moment, I understood why people fell to their knees in his presence. His eyes held eternity itself, love, sorrow, justice, and mercy all at once. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, and in that gaze, my soul trembled. Then, he asked me a question. "Lucas, do you know why you are here?" I wanted to answer, but I couldn't find the words. Then, without warning, it began. My entire life flashed before my eyes, not as memories, but as if I were reliving every moment. I felt every choice I had made, every time I had turned away from the truth, every opportunity to know Him that I had ignored. But it wasn't just my actions, I felt the consequences of those actions. The hurt I had caused, the people I had led astray, the chances I had to choose God, and how I had dismissed them without a second thought. Tears streamed down my face. I was guilty. But Jesus didn't show me this to condemn me. He was showing me the truth, the reality I had refused to see. Then, everything shifted. The light around us dimmed, and suddenly, I wasn't standing before Jesus anymore, I was watching the world from above. And what I saw made my blood run cold. I saw a world in chaos. Fires burned across cities, the sky was dark, and people were running, screaming. But there was something worse, something beneath the surface. I could feel the darkness, the deception that had taken hold of humanity. I saw people willingly walking into what looked like a system of peace, a new order that promised safety and unity. But behind it, there was something else. I saw figures, leaders, influencers, people in power, who spoke of progress, yet their eyes were hollow, void of light. They were controlled. Then, I saw people being marked. At first, it seemed harmless, a simple scan, an insignia on their hands and foreheads. But the moment they accepted it, I saw something leave them. Their souls dimmed, their free will vanished. They belonged to something else now. They weren't enslaved in chains, but they were no longer themselves. "This is what is coming," Jesus said beside me. "A choice is coming, and many will choose wrong." I watched in horror as churches that had once been filled with believers were now empty. But it wasn't just because people had stopped believing. Many still claimed to follow God, but their faith had been twisted. They believed in a version of Christianity that was comfortable, compromised, and powerless. I saw preachers who once spoke the truth now leading people into deception. I saw Christians who once followed Jesus mocking those who still held onto the word. Tears fell from my eyes. "Jesus, why are you showing me this? What can I do?" His gaze met mine, filled with both love and sorrow. "Because the time is short, and I am still calling to them." I turned back to the vision. I saw believers, true believers, being persecuted. They were hunted, rejected, forced into hiding. Not just by the world, but by those who had once called themselves brothers and sisters in Christ. The world had turned against them. And yet, they remained firm. They were not afraid. They stood in the fire, and they did not waver. Jesus stepped forward, and the vision faded. I was back in the light, standing before Him. My heart pounded in my chest. I thought of my mother, of the prayers she had whispered for me night after night, of the moments I had ignored her warnings. I thought of my friends, my coworkers, all the people I knew who were walking straight into the darkness, unaware of what was coming. "Jesus, please, let me go back. Let me warn them." He stepped closer, placing his hand on my shoulder. You will return. But many will not listen. Many will mock you, reject you. But some will hear. And for them, you must speak. Before I could say another word, a force pulled me backward. The light around me blurred, and suddenly, I gasped, my lungs burning, my body convulsing as I jolted awake in the hospital bed. Machines beeped wildly, doctors shouted, and my mother was sobbing beside me, clutching my hand. I had been dead for 6 minutes. I had been given a second chance. When I could finally speak, the first thing I said was, "Mom, you were right. Jesus is real. And he's coming soon." As I lay in that hospital bed, my body weak but my mind racing, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. The images of the world's downfall, the deception, the persecution of true believers, it was all burned into my soul. It wasn't just a vision. It was a warning, and I knew I had been sent back to share it. But how? How could I possibly explain what I had seen? Who would believe me? The doctors were baffled. I had been clinically dead for 6 minutes. They said I should have suffered severe brain damage, yet here I was, fully alert, completely aware. My mother, who had prayed for me for so many years, knew something miraculous had happened. She kept holding my hand, whispering prayers of thanks, tears streaming down her face. But my father? He just stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was a practical man, a skeptic. I could tell he wanted to believe that my survival was a miracle, but he also wanted an explanation. A logical one. The first night after I woke up, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of those people who had been marked, their eyes hollow, their souls no longer their own. I saw the churches that had once been filled with passion now empty, cold, abandoned. I saw the persecution, the real kind. Not just people being mocked for their faith, but being hunted, arrested, even killed for refusing to conform to the world's deception. And then, most haunting of all, I saw the pit. I saw the abyss where the lost souls cried out, reaching for a salvation that would never come. I had to tell someone. The next morning, my mother and father sat beside me as I gathered the courage to speak. I told them everything, how I had left my body, how I had fallen into the darkness, how I had seen Jesus and the horrifying visions he had shown me. I watched my mother's face go pale, her lips trembling, but she never interrupted. My father, however, let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "This was just a dream, Lucas," he said, his voice firm. "You were dead. Your brain was shutting down. People see things in situations like that." I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Dad, I know what I saw. This wasn't a dream. I saw Jesus. I saw what's coming. People think they have time, but they don't. The door is closing." My mother wiped at her eyes. "What do you mean, the door is closing?" I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "Jesus told me a choice is coming. Something is going to happen that will force people to pick a side. They'll either stand with him or they'll follow the world. And most, I exhaled, the weight of what I was about to say pressing on my chest. Most will choose wrong. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. Lucas, do you hear yourself? You sound crazy. I stared at him, pleading with my eyes. Dad, I saw hell. I saw people I know in that place. Friends. Classmates. People who thought they were good, people who thought they had more time. But they didn't. It was too late for them. Silence filled the room. My mother reached for my hand again. Lucas, she whispered, what does God want you to do? That question echoed in my mind over the next few days. What did God want me to do? It wasn't just about telling my parents. I knew that. I had to warn everyone. But how? Where would I even start? The first time I spoke publicly about my experience was at my church. My mother convinced the pastor to let me share my testimony, and as I stood at the front of the congregation, looking out at the faces of people who had known me since childhood, doubt crept in. Would they believe me? Would they think I had lost my mind? I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told them about the accident, about the darkness, about Jesus. I told them about the visions of the last days, about the deception that was already creeping into the world, about the choice that was coming. The room was silent, the air heavy with an unseen presence. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked skeptical, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. When I finished, the pastor stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "If this is true, then we have no time to waste." That was the moment I realized that not everyone would believe me, but some would. Some would listen. And for those people, I had to keep speaking. Over the next few months, I dedicated myself to spreading the message Jesus had given me. I spoke at youth groups, at Bible studies, at any place that would let me share what I had seen. Some people believed. Others mocked. I lost friends, people who thought I had lost my mind. Some even accused me of making the whole thing up for attention. One night, I was invited to speak at a university group. The students were polite, but I could see the doubt in their faces as I told my story. Afterward, a young man approached me, his expression unreadable. "I want to believe you," he said. "But if what you're saying is true, then almost everything I've ever believed is a lie. That's hard to accept." I nodded. I know. It was hard for me, too. But ask yourself, what if it's not a lie? What if Jesus really is coming soon? What if the choice you make today decides your eternity? He swallowed, looking away. I don't know. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small Bible, placing it in his hands. "Start here," I said, "and ask God to show you the truth." I never saw that young man again, but I pray for him to this day. I pray that he made the right choice. As time went on, I realized the battle wasn't just about warning people. It was about preparing them. Jesus had shown me that a time of testing was coming, and those who weren't ready would fall. Faith couldn't just be a Sunday morning ritual. It had to be real, unshakable. I saw believers in my vision who had thought they were strong in their faith, yet when the deception came, when the persecution started, they were the first to turn away. They weren't prepared. They had built their faith on comfort, not conviction. That's why Jesus sent me back, not just to warn people, but to wake them up. To make them see that faith is a fight, and that if they weren't ready to stand, they would fall. I still struggle sometimes. I still wonder why God chose me, why I was given this mission. But every time doubt creeps in, I remember the pit. I remember the voices of those souls crying out, knowing they would never escape. And I remember Jesus' words. Tell them. Warn them. Because soon, the door will close. If you're listening to this right now, I need you to understand something. This isn't just my story. This is your warning. Time is running out. A choice is coming, and you will have to decide. No one else can choose for you. Jesus is calling you. But he won't wait forever. The question is, will you answer before it's too late?